Did you hear that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
highly synthetic voice said.
That's what we're after.
Then I guess I can stop video if I need to. So maybe that's what it's indicating. Cool.
So many mystery icons. What does it do? I don't know. Just keep pushing buttons till something happens. That's my philosophy.
I imagine there's this incredible bank of Zoom recordings from the most mundane meetings to the most interesting workshops that are now taking up insane amounts of data somewhere.
I'll bet it's weighted heavily on the mundane side, though.
Yeah, you're gonna have to sift to find the good ones.
Yeah.
More appropriate background. How's that? Is that better?
Oh, you have bilateral hay bales.
Yes.
My computer isn't fancy enough to do a background, so unfortunately.
I don't even know how, honestly.
I
I
think
haven't bothered to figure it out.
I think my computer is 4 or 5 years old, so it's not the most up to date either, but we've got the most more up to date software. So
That's all you need.
yep. Works for me.
Hello, Sam.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Sam.
How you doing?
Hi, Sam.
It sounded like everybody kind of knows each other already, but should we make introductions if not?
Sure,
Yeah.
Sam, you might not remember that you know me, but I met you at your farm about 2 months ago when I came with Mary Chang.
Yep, with Mary. Yep, I remember.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Good to see you, Sam.
Same, likewise.
I've never met Julie, I think.
I'm not sure if we have met. I think I've been to a couple programs where you were on a panel discussion.
Okay,
You're a BARD professor, right?
right.
Yes, I am a BARD graduate.
Oh, okay, good.
And a soil
Go Bard.
enthusiast.
So is Sam and Terrence.
Mhm. Yeah, Jen was both of our thesis advisors. Or advisor.
Ah, okay.
And
Yay.
delivering the students to CLC.
The pipeline is well established.
That's great.
So it's just 6:30 now. I guess I'm going to start letting participants in. They'll be muted and their videos will be off when they come in. Yeah, just give it a few minutes. If they're like me, they are going to join right at 6:30. So, or maybe even 6:31.
Another Sam.
Hi, everyone who's just joining. We're going to give it a few minutes and let people filter in. Your audio and your video should be off when you join the meeting, and we're going to ask that you keep it that way until we open up for question and answer and discussion later on. So feel free to just hang tight for a few minutes while we let participants join the call.
Hi, Art. You got high-tech lighting in there?
Yeah, hi, Tech. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi there.
Hi, Sam. Hi, Julie.
Or we're just letting people filter in for a few minutes. And folks who have joined, just keep your audio muted. We'll mute it for you if you don't, but we're just gonna give it a few more minutes, let the rest of the folks join, and then we'll get started.
We had a lot of people for our ag forums that would sign up but didn't show up, but that's because we get the email link for the recording. So I think that's, some people do that.
I'm sure there's a few of those.
We found it really tough to download and put, we're going to put them on our website. I was trying to send them to the county and, you know, because I had the recording, we ended up having to put it on our YouTube channel and then send it to the county that way. And that's what worked. It worked really well, really easily that way. And, but I find a lot of people just sign up just because they know they can watch it later.
Yeah, well, well, if they join, and if they don't, that's fine. The recording will be useful. And
absolutely.
I know I've heard from folks that they've watched the recordings from those panels. So the resources for everyone ultimately.
We've got one more to go. That'll be in December. It's on food justice.
Great. Well, it's 6:35, so we might as well push on and let people join as they want to. So thanks everyone for coming tonight. I'm just going to pull up a presentation. And I'll do the obligatory. You can all see my screen, right? Great, I see some thumbs up. Great, well, like I said, thanks everyone for joining us tonight in what is our first of our Down to Earth workshop series, which is a series of workshops we hold every year in collaboration with Dutchess Land Conservancy as part of our farmland matching program. Tonight we're going to be sort of doing a very basic intro to farmland leasing, the tools and the resources that are available to you through our program and through another statewide program, and then talk a little bit about approaches to leasing, leasing basics, and hear from two really great examples of leases that have been established in the last year or so in Columbia and Dutchess counties. So we're excited to start off. Just to give you a little bit of background before we start about Columbia Land Conservancy. So I should say I'm Sam Calhoun. I'm the Agricultural Programs Associate at the Columbia Land Conservancy. And the Columbia Land Conservancy is a 501c3 nonprofit land trust based in Chatham, New York, which is in, you guessed it, Columbia County. And the CLC's mission is to work within the community to conserve farmland, forests, wildlife habitat, rural character of Columbia County, all while strengthening connections between people and the land. We were established in 1986 and have since protected over 35,000 acres of land from development in Columbia County. We do this primarily by working with private landowners and using conservation easements, which are a legal tool that landowners can use to donate or extinguish development rights on their property. We do this in a number of ways, collaborating with, like I said, private landowners, government agencies, community groups, dozens of partner organizations. And sort of relevant to our conversation tonight is we do a lot of work on working farmlands. So through purchase of development right programs, which actually pay farmers to purchase their development rights, pretty self-explanatory. We've protected over 11,000 acres of farmland in Columbia County. And I just wanted to break here. We collaborate on our farmland matching programs with the Dutchess Land Conservancy, and we have a few folks from the Dutchess Land Conservancy with us tonight. And so I wanted to offer an opportunity to Art Collins, who's the Vice President of Stewardship and Conservation, or maybe Conservation and Stewardship. There we go. Other way around, regardless. Just to tell you a little bit about DLC before we get started. So
great, thanks, Sam. That is a very impressive acreage total for land that Columbia Land Conservancy has purchased the development rights on, by the way. That's an amazing number. The Dutchess Land Conservancy was founded a year earlier in 1986. We have protected about 44,000 acres of land. We got that first year, we really were working hard. Also, much of the work that we do is with purchasing the development rights on farmland, which is something that we have several staff members who work directly with farmers to work them through the rather long and complicated process of purchasing the development rights on farmland, and we're very grateful to the sources of funding that we can go to get that to be able in a position to purchase development rights on farmland, and that includes Dutchess County that has a farmland protection program, as well as the New York State Department of Ag and Markets and other sources. The DLC is also a private nonprofit 501c3 land trust, and we welcome the opportunity for people in Dutchess County to find out more about Dutchess Land Conservancy by going to our website, www.dutchessland.org, or by calling us up. The final thing to say is we have been very pleased to be a partner with Columbia Land Conservancy in the Farmer Landowner Match Program for quite a number of years now, about 7 or 8 years, and we're extremely happy to participate in this program.
Thank you, Art. And like Art mentioned, CLC and DLC collaborate on our Farmer Landowner Match Program, which is part of our broader farm program at CLC, which we happily refer to as the Farmland Access, Resources, and Matching. So like I mentioned, primarily our expertise are in farmland protection using conservation tools. You know, through our work with farms, you know, we started to realize that there are a number of other ways that we can help support the agricultural community in our region, and also keep farmland farmed in agricultural production. So land access and farmland leasing are another great tool to accomplish our mission. So we've created this sort of broad farm program that uses conservation tools, land matching, connections to resources. So, you know, a network of regional service providers, some of whom are represented here tonight, that all work to support the agricultural community in one way or another. And then also as part of our program, we offer sort of one-on-one consultations with farmers and landowners to help them reach long-term secure land tenure arrangements. And that's both with CLC staff, so myself and Terrence Duval and Marissa Cody, who make up our ag team, as well as with a volunteer group of farmers who we refer to as our farm advisors. And these are farmers from the area who might have a lot of experience and be willing to consult with farmers and or landowners about land management strategies, business development, approaches to farming in general. So those are just kind of a brief summary of the farm program, and we can sort of dig in. So we really started this program in recognition of a large problem in the Hudson Valley and regions similar to ours, where land access is a really serious challenge. And so time and time again, we've seen and heard from beginning farmers who are trying to establish businesses that it's really hard to find land to rent, and and also to buy, especially to buy. And that's because parcels in our area might not be set up for a startup operation. They might be too large. They might have sort of infrastructure in disrepair that's not helpful for farmers. And it's also extremely hard to jump into lease negotiations without sort of a framework or just starting from square one. And farmers in our area are also competing for land with developers, farmland investors, established farmers who have capital to purchase farms, as well as residential buyers or non-operating farmland owners who own farmland but do not have interest in farming it themselves. And last but certainly not least, good farmland is expensive, and it's continuing to become more prohibitive to farmers who are looking to establish businesses in our area. And so, the problem here is that secure land tenure is also extremely important, both in terms of creating sustainable and viable agricultural businesses. So establishing secure land tenure for farmers is really important. They want to have secure and long-term access to land, especially if it's through a lease. And really, secure land tenure includes a couple of conditions. So quickly, affordability and availability, fairly obvious, but still true. Stability of a leasing relationship or land tenure relationship. Stability can impact a farmer's willingness to invest in infrastructural improvements or other things like that that don't benefit them in the short term, but really pay off down the road. Also, making sure you're being compatible with land use laws, lease and deed terms when you're looking at land tenure. And then also considering sort of equity in land tenure, making sure that there's a balance of benefit between farmers and landowners, and looking for secure housing, which has been a really big issue, especially in the last couple of years as housing prices have increased and farmers are finding it harder and harder to find housing either on farms that they're leasing, near farms that they're leasing, or near land that they're leasing. And so that not only can impact sort of a business goal, but also a personal sort of life goal as well. And so Columbia Land Conservancy in 2008 started the Farmer Landowner Match Program, which is, I'll just go to my go-to analogy, which is it's basically online dating for farmers and landowners. There are a number of land linking, land matching sites that have popped up all across the country in the last decade or so. And they all function similarly, where farmers and landowners sign up to be part of a database. They craft profiles that explain what they're looking for, what their land has to offer, what they're looking to do. You can browse listings on our platform, contact different people, start conversations, and then also access resources. So we host a library of online resources that include things like lease templates, lease building tools, financial planning guides, business development guides, so on and so forth. Also links to other organizations in our area who are doing similar work. And then, after you establish yourself on the site and you start your search, you're searching, it can take a long time. Often speaking with dozens of folks about potential leasing arrangements. And when you find a person, then you get to step 2, which is working on a lease. So in our program, we're able to offer support in terms of lease considerations, and then connections to relevant advisors, whether it's attorneys to review a lease, business planning professionals who can help you think about viability of a business plan, long-term investments, et cetera. And so this site is really focused on Columbia and Dutchess County, but we're also part of a broader network of service providers through the Farmland for New Generation New York program, which is a statewide farmland matching program that is hosted by American Farmland Trust in collaboration with the Department of Agriculture and Markets in New York State. And so they have a team of organizations similar to CLC, which they have coined the regional navigators. So I think there's about 26 regional navigators across New York State who are available to support folks who are looking for land access through the program. And again, similarly to our site, they offer resources, they host events, workshops like these, and they also host a job board. So CLC is a partner, DLC is a partner, CCE is a partner in that organization. So we're sort of the regional contacts for folks who are looking to access that program. And so that's basically our two tools that we're using, the two websites. And I'm going to transition a little bit into a couple of just lease basics for folks who might be sort of just starting their journey into land leasing and are kind of wondering about what sorts of considerations they should be making when they're speaking with farmers or speaking with landowners. And so I think, although it's sort of basic concepts, really important to just touch on sort of different types of leases that exist in farmland leasing and within land access. So generally, these can be broken into sort of two categories, short-term and long-term. Short-term leases tend to be annual or something like 3 to 5 years. And it can be a really great lease arrangement for a beginning farmer or someone new to get their feet wet a little bit, to test a business plan, to sort of establish a relationship, a leasing relationship, and make sure that it's equitable and it is going to work. And then there are longer term leases, which anywhere from 5 to 99 years, and that seems like a long range, but typically these are like 5 to 10 year leases. Long-term leases give farmers a little bit more stability in terms of just length of term. And then also a long-term lease of 5 years is the minimum requirement to receive an agricultural tax assessment, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but is a significant motivation for landowners who are looking to lease their land. And then just a couple of other types of leases, just to mention them so that you're aware that they exist. One is a ground lease, which is a long-term lease where you separate ownership of land from the improvements that sit on the land. So as an example, CLC has completed one ground lease project at Thompson Finch Farm. And there are a number of examples around the Hudson Valley and in New England of other farms and organizations who have done this. And essentially what happens is you split that ownership. So CLC at Thompson Finch Farm purchased the farm from the farmers. The farmers retained ownership of their infrastructure, so their houses, their barns, even things like perennial crops, apple trees, other on-farm infrastructure. CLC owns the land and leases it back to them on a 99-year term. So really a combination of affordability of a lease, but with the security of ownership. There are also things like rolling term leases. So the term rolls forward. So it might be a lease that you revisit every year, but every time you sign it, the term is extended for 3 years. So in that way, farmers are getting a little bit of security, but you're also able to address problems or make changes in the short term. And then just to mention them, lease to buy arrangements. So rental payments that eventually count towards a future purchase of a property. You can kind of think of it like turning into a mortgage payment, or it might be a rental term that culminates in an opportunity for a farmer to purchase land from the landowner. And then lastly, just because we've seen a few examples of partnerships, so really a partnership in business where a landowner is able to invite a farmer into a business relationship and partner with them to establish an operation. It's probably not typical of folks that are using our programs to access land, but certainly is out there and happens. So quickly, when talking with farmers and landowners, I'm always trying to help them see the other side of things or the other perspective. So, for farmers, leasing has a lot of advantages and obviously some disadvantages, but they're able to access land without large capital investments if they can't purchase land outright. It provides flexibility if you're just looking to gain a little bit of experience but aren't ready to establish yourself in a place or on a property. It creates kind of a trial period for farmers to test viability of their plans and their farm businesses. And it also limits financial risk for farmers who, if they're just getting started, probably don't want to tether themselves to a loan to purchase land. And then for landowners, we live in a very agriculturally oriented region, and many are eager to engage in their local communities, especially their farming communities. And one way you can do that, besides just joining a CSA or purchasing local food, is to open land up for access opportunities to farmers in our area. So that can be rewarding for landowners. They also receive some benefits in terms of land management. So if you're a non-operating landowner and you have farmland that you don't want to see fall into or be abandoned, whether it's pastures that would grow up into shrubby invasive mess or woods, farming is one way to keep areas clear, to improve soil, to increase biodiversity, and can provide a lot of services. And an important distinction between land management in agriculture and land management in terms of things like landscaping or maintaining sort of visual aesthetics, which is not sort of the goal, or should not be the goal, of a landowner who's looking to lease their land. And lastly, a large motivation for farm landowners in our program is the agricultural tax assessment, which is a reduction in your property taxes for opening your land to agriculture. And so there are a few requirements, like I mentioned: a 5-year lease on 7 acres of land with a farming operation that is generating a revenue of $10,000, not necessarily on the property that they lease from you, the landowner, but in general in their total overall operation. And we can send out more resources about the ag assessment program if people are interested. And I'm sure Jen Fimble or others can speak to the ag assessment as well if people have questions. And I also wanted to make sure that we're considering sort of some of the challenges of leasing as we sort of hear from our panelists and from our speakers tonight. So for farmers, insecurity of tenure. If you don't have secure land tenure, you're likely to not want to make large investments in land to improve land without knowing that you're going to be able to see the benefit from that. It can create an uncertain situation for farmers who are leasing land, who really don't have the upper hand. The landowner really is going to have the upper hand ultimately in the leasing arrangement. It limits farmers' ability to build equity, to access capital, and like I said, can sort of disincentivize long-term conservation practices to do things like improve soil or biodiversity, or large infrastructure investments like building a permanent structure that they can't take with them should their lease term end or their lease be terminated. And then for landowners, balancing agricultural and residential land management goals, which I talked about on the previous slide a little bit, just making sure that agriculture fits into an overall land management strategy without becoming a sore spot. Also, for landowners, granting autonomy to leasing farmers can be a challenge. Farmers really need to be able to act in their best interest, and especially in the best interest of their operation when they're leasing. And sometimes giving up that power is difficult for landowners. So making sure landowners understand that farmers need to be able to act independently when they need to. And then also maintaining lease relationships and communication, and then managing sort of expectations for landowners who may or may not have a romanticized version of what farming on their property is going to ultimately look like. I think we all know farming can sometimes look and sound and smell a certain way that, is just the reality of agriculture. And so making sure that you've got a clear idea of what that's going to look like on your property before you start looking for a lease is really important. And so to sort of close out my portion, I just wanted to offer sort of a few strategies for finding successful leases, or a couple of the factors that we see in leases that we've helped coordinate. So one is patience and persistence. This process does take time. It's not easy, and takes sort of a dedication to finding a lease. Every once in a while, you'll get lucky and we'll see someone make a connection quickly, but there are a number of examples in our program where farmers talk to close to 100 people before they find a leasing arrangement that is really going to work for them. And so within that arrangement, making sure that there's clear channels of communication. That's something that you can build right into a lease. For example, setting up like a monthly meeting on the first Saturday of every month or something like that. Or maybe it's quarterly meetings where a farmer and a landowner can sit down at the table together and go over everything that's happened in the last month, talk about any problems that they've had come up, and it really establishing like a formal opportunity for communication rather than relying on conversations in passing or casual conversations. Having that opportunity can stop things from boiling over or from resentment kind of building, which often ends poorly. And then a couple of other key points, just honesty when you're going into this process, expressing your needs, your goals, your experience, your interests is really important. It can save everybody a lot of time if you just know that this isn't going to work for whatever reason. Just being upfront and honest is fine. There's no sense in signing a lease that you don't feel good about. Leases pretty much always are going to have conflict. So making sure that you're honest from the start can really be is really the best approach. And then also balancing sort of business and personal relationships, whether it's a personal relationship that existed prior to signing a lease or a relationship that's developed as a lease progresses. Finding balance in those relationships and keeping them separate, making sure that you're using sort of the formal communication channels that you've set up to discuss leases rather than, maybe you're on pass each other on the farm one day and someone mentions the problem and then it goes unaddressed and it was never written down or formalized in any way. So making sure you don't fall into that sort of trap and are keeping those two aspects sort of separate. And I think I'm gonna just leave it there. And we can move to Jen Fimble, who is the Senior Resource Educator and Ag Navigator in Dutchess County. And she works at the Dutchess County Cooperative Extension Office. And she has a wealth of experience navigating farmland leases, agricultural topics, education, et cetera, so on and so forth. So I'll just turn it over to you, Jen. And I have your slideshow, but if you want to share your screen.
Excellent. No, that's perfect.
Okay, great. Let me just switch to yours. Where's my Zoom? There we go. Sorry, thanks. Bear with me.
Yeah. Pull it right up and we'll be good. Good to go.
Everybody see that?
Whoops. I hope I didn't put any animation in it. I didn't think about that. I always forget that piece.
What we're seeing is the presenter's view, though. Can you
Yeah.
go to the show mode so we don't see?
Yeah.
Let
It's
me
like-
try again. How's that?
There you go. Perfect.
Great. Just let me know when you need me to advance, Jen. And that can be
Okay.
cool.
So, so if you click twice, I think then the two, yeah, so there is animation in this. Oh, no, sorry about that. So I'm actually employed by Cornell Cooperative Extension in Dutchess County. I've been there since 1986. And in 2015, we partnered with the county who's always done our funding. But there was another piece that they wanted to add to all of what we do. And so the Dutchess County Ag Navigator was created. So the other part of my job, 50% is the Ag Navigator position. The other 50% is as a regular working with farmers on best management practices and that sort of thing, landowners, et cetera, et cetera. So go ahead and go to the next slide, Sam. That makes it pretty easy. Okay, so in 2015, the Dutchess County Ag and Farmland Protection Board and Dutchess County updated the existing Ag and Farmland Protection Plan for Dutchess County. And so that's a live link so that when you get that in an email, you can go ahead and click on that. You can see what our protection plan looks like. And in quotes, yes, like most other businesses have some sort of economic development initiatives, agriculture doesn't. And so our consultant who worked on the Ag and Farmland Protection Plan update really wanted the county to develop the capacity and communication and a collaboration to have a regional position be considered just for agriculture. And at the time, go ahead, next slide, I think. Yeah. So at the time, there were two other counties going through a similar process. And so all three verbally said, yes, we want to do this, have a regional ag navigator, not a regional navigator like American Farmland Trust, because that was not even an inkling in anybody's eye yet, but someone who was going to work with the three counties. And so in 2016, our county budget included funds for a regional ag navigator. But Dutchess County is the only county that put money aside for that funding. So our county executive said, then we'll put together a request for proposals and create a scope of work. Any proposal had to include one person named specifically as ag navigator, but it had to be somebody also as a part of an organization. You had to be able to apply through the grants.gov. So in 2016, August, Cornell Cooperative Extension Dutchess County was awarded the grant, and I was named the Ag Navigator for this grant, and I've been that since 2016. Next slide. That's how it was funded. Oh, we're going to have to hit it again. Yeah. So the mission is to foster better understanding of the importance of local agriculture to local officials and Dutchess County economic specialists. I act as a conduit for farmers, municipal officials, and economic development specialists to provide impartial information and advice when implementation of local regulations are proposed that may have an impact on agriculture, farmland, and ag businesses. So what that means is quite often I'll get a phone call from a farmer saying, hey, the town of such and such just charged me this outrageous fee for a building permit for my barn. And so we talk a little bit about why they think that happened. Was it, do they have an ag rate? And so they go back and they'll talk to their zoning CO, or they will talk to the building inspector and say, listen, I don't think that you really should be doing this. If it doesn't work, I will step in. I will talk to the people at the county, at the town offices. And so sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And so we've actually, one of our successes through this program is the development of a right to farm law for Dutchess County. And we have a resolution committee that works with that to take it one step further, because I have no power, so to speak, to rectify that. I just do a lot of education. Go ahead, next slide. And hit it again. There we go. So I get to coordinate, collaborate, and communicate with county municipal officials, the farming community, ag organizations, and other agencies on ag issues and solutions, economic viability and sustainability of farming, opportunities and feasibility of new infrastructures related to agriculture. So it's really been exciting. It's a very different role than what I've been playing since 1986. I get to be out there a lot more and talk to people that don't know about agriculture. And I think that's what makes it so much more exciting and fun. The Ag Navigator also assists with the implementation of the Dutchess County Agricultural and Farmland Protection Plan under the guidance of a county executive appointed Dutchess County Agricultural Advisory Committee. So that committee does, we've had a couple changes on there, but that is a committee that's very solid. We meet quarterly, or I meet quarterly with them, and they sort of guide what directions we should be going into. And that's where our ag forums that this past year that we've had came from, was that from that committee. Next slide. So our Ag and Farmland Protection Board, our Ag and Farmland Protection Plan had 5 initiatives. And this is just a simple slide about, so coordinate is create the Ag Navigator and the Ag Advisory Committee. That was initiative number 1. Check, we did it. Initiative number 2, Ag Economic Development and Business Retention and Expansion Program. So I work with the Think Dutchess Alliance for Business, who is with Ron Hicks, who's the county executive's assistant, on things matters to farmland, getting businesses in, finding maybe a warehouse. Right now, we're working through that with them to try to find some sort of structure or warehouse that we can have another slaughterhouse in Dutchess County, because it's a severe need right now. So we do a lot with them as well. They call me, I call them. The 3rd initiative is farmland preservation. So I work with DLC and CLC on that. 4th initiative is marketing, public relations, and awareness. And the 5th is farm-friendly regulation. And so some of our successes with that, so I'll go ahead and hit the next one, is really some highlights of what we've done. We've offered municipal official trainings, and it's not just me. I will never take credit for this entire program. It's a whole slew of people, Cornell Cooperative Extension, the Ag Advisory, people, Dutchess County Planning. I could not do or take any credit without having them involved in this, because they've done a lot of this. But we had 60 assessors trained on New York state law and agricultural properties, and that was huge. It was a real learning curve. I always learn things. We call it the Bob and Bob show. It was Bob Wright and Bob Somers. Both of them have since retired. It's left a real hole in ag and markets for us. But I think that we were able to garner a lot of information out of that program that we had. Providing local planning and town agricultural committees with the tools to address the needs of even our smallest farms. So we've worked with local communities on comprehensive plans when it comes to the agricultural portion, helping them with definitions of agriculture and farming practices. When they say, well, you need at least half an acre to have a horse. Well, I always ask them, is that a miniature horse or is that a draft horse? You're talking, thousands of pounds difference. And so we talk more about pounds of animals for grazing to keep it so that it doesn't look, so that the neighbors won't be disappointed. So those are the kinds of things that we've done through this farm-friendly stuff. Encourage more farm-friendly regulations within municipalities. I think that's one of our biggest challenges. Shelby Frank, who's a planner with Dutchess County Planning, did an audit of all 30 municipalities, their comprehensive plans and zoning codes, as to see how farm-friendly each of them were. I've counseled local fire commissioners on their role in special districts and the budget process. So we really have done a lot of different things to see where we can help farmers, but where farmers can also help their towns, make sure that there's a nice coexistence that really wasn't there before. So I think having the Ag Navigator program has really been a huge success. So when we've had issues between local governments and farmers, 80% of the issues that were raised were resolved. That's been in the last 6 years. I think that's an awesome record. So I think that we've done a really good job of at least getting our municipal officials educated on agriculture in itself. We still have a long way to go because we change elected officials all the time. So next slide. I said before that the development and the adoption of a countywide right to farm law. Within that county, what it does is it's modeled after New York State's right to farm law. It helps to protect farms, and it really sends a message that we are a farm-friendly county. Part of that is a resolution committee, so that if there's an issue that can't be resolved either through the farmer and the municipal officials, or if I intervene and it still isn't getting resolved, then we can refer it to the resolution committee. As of today, they have not met yet. And so this was done in 2019. So in 2 years, we haven't had any issues that went beyond getting resolved at the local level. Taking it to the next step at the county level to have somebody help resolve that is, you know, I think we may have one upcoming, at least they'll be in the discussion phases, but it's been really helpful, I think, when towns look at that and say, oh, maybe we ought not to pursue that. Or a farmer says, oh, maybe I'm wrong on that. We've done a lot of, one of our initiatives is also involves youth and getting them interested in agriculture. So when we started this back in 2016, we had one FFA program. That was the Pine Plains FFA. Since then, we now have 3 FFA programs, one at Dutchess County BOCES and one at John Jay High School in Wappinger Central School District. We've also worked with the Green Team program through our 4-H program area here in Dutchess and the Poughkeepsie Farm Project. Dutchess Community College is also in the infancy of offering some agricultural classes and hopefully some sort of certificate program down the road. So we really have made a lot of progress in just a few years. And I believe that there is another school in Dutchess County that is at least hired an agricultural teacher. They don't have an FFA yet, but I think that's the next step. One of the things we've done, and that was through a whole slew of people, is an agricultural resources inventory. And that's also online. That's why it's highlighted. So it's available on our Dutchess County government's website. It's a searchable database related to agriculture. And so you can type in funding or grants or loans or something along those lines, and hopefully it pops up correctly. But it's also a nice booklet. It's about 20 pages, I think, of just different resources from the local, county, regional, and state, and some federal. So there's a lot of resources in there that are available. And then last but not least, oh no, I guess we got a couple. Go ahead, next slide, please. And so in the last year, we did 4 farming in Dutchess County virtual programs. We worked with the Dutchess County Ag Advisory Committee to ensure that programming needs were met because we did not have our regular ag forum at the Dutchess County Fair until back, so we missed it in 2020. Not a huge group of people watching them, but I think more people have actually watched the recordings of those. We did have something similar to this one where leasing was part of it, but was also about the farmer side, the landowner side, the assessor side. So we had an assessor come in, a couple of assessors talk on that as well. We've had ag education, we've had the importance of local farms, and we also had that was the last one. We have one coming up that's on food justice, food security and food justice. During COVID, I created a listing of all the farm stores that were in Dutchess County. We had 50 of them. Who knew? I mean, we're a county that's 60 miles by 40 miles. We've got 50 farm stores. And so putting them on a list and then getting it on the county's website was a huge boon to them. And we got, I think Central Hudson put it out in their newsletter that this was available. It was on our website. So it was a whole listing of all the farm stores, their hours, their telephone numbers, what kind of products they had. And our farmer owners really quick to adapt, offer online ordering and curbside pickup. And last we did was hashtag Farm Stand Fridays. So the county had come up with, the regional chamber for Dutchess County had come up with hashtag Takeout Tuesdays to help the restaurants. So I got thinking about it. I said, why can't we do hashtag Farm Stand Fridays? And so with tourism, the Dutchess County Chamber and Think Dutchess Alliance for Business, we brought this out, and we still have a presence on social media using this. So it was kind of a fun thing to do, but it was also, I think, really helpful for our farms to see that every week we try to highlight a farm here or there. And then I just have a couple of take-home messages for you. There we go. We cannot overlook the importance of our small farms. The impact is tremendous. These farmers may not be making their entire living on these smaller farms or properties, but they shouldn't be excluded in the planning process. And it's important for municipalities, town boards, town assessors, and town planners to realize the importance of agricultural land within their community and the impacts their decisions make on local farms. I think, is there one more slide? Yep, last one. It's just, I always find this really interesting. I don't think people always pay attention to this. So cost of community services, there's the link to the fact sheet. Although working in open space lands may generate less revenue than residential, commercial, or industrial properties, they require less public infrastructure and fewer community services. So in a cost of community services studies from 25 states show that on average, the median cost per dollar of revenue raised to provide public services for commercial and industrial lands was 30 cents. For working in open space lands was 37 cents. That's for per dollar paid. And for residential lands, it was $1.16. So lands, so open lands and farmland are actually paying for those extra infrastructures that our residential people use. So it's always important. I think municipal officials always are shocked at that. So it's something to really think about and keep in the back of your mind. So that's what I get to do.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Jen, for offering your perspective and talking a little bit about the Ag Navigator role in Dutchess County and your work supporting farmers and landowners. So I'm going to stop sharing your presentation and we'll move over to Jen Phillips, who is one of our examples of someone who has established a lease in collaboration with our program and with a number of other advisors to tell you a little bit about her experience, both beginning as a leasing farmer and then moving into a lesser role. Lessor, not lesser. Just to be clear. And so, yeah, Jen, I have your presentation as well if you want me to just pop it up, if that's easier.
Sure. Yes, please.
Okay,
And I'll just have you advance.
sure. Oops, sorry.
So while Sam is doing that, I'll just say I've kind of been on both sides of this equation because I was a renter of farmland, both in Stuyvesant when I very first started raising livestock, and then when I moved down to Claremont, I was also renting land. And then eventually was able to purchase the land, and now I'm renting my land to other people. So my farm is Gansfort Farm. I'm in Claremont, so in the southern area of Columbia County. And I started raising sheep in 2002 up in Stuyvesant. And I teach at Bard College, so I'm not making my living off of raising sheep, but my operation got to about 50 ewes, producing about 100 lambs a year. I moved to Claremont in 2009 to partly so that I could be closer to Bard, and I found land that I could rent here. So I'm only 15 minutes from Bard instead of an hour from Bard. And at that point, I had also added cattle to my operation. And then eventually in 2013, the woman who owned the land that I was renting was able to secure a conservation easement through Scenic Hudson on this land. So that allowed for the purchase price to be much lower, and she's actually carrying the mortgage as well, which was a big plus in allowing me to actually purchase this land. And so Scenic Hudson is the organization that is managing the easement. Next, please. So my overall goals are, first of all, that I want to be able to produce healthy food and use sustainable grazing practices. So I'm really into intensive rotational grazing, and my livestock is all 100% grass-fed. And I'm also really interested in managing my farm as habitat. So a lot of the things that I've been undertaking are trying to improve habitat on my land. So I see that being a real important dual role, both producing food, but also providing a place for wildlife to live. And I think that there are ways that this kind of a farming system can also be important for carbon storage too. So that's one of the things that both in my academic career as well as on the farm, I'm very interested in soil carbon. But also I'm farmed by myself. So over that last many year period of raising sheep and then cattle for a period of time, was doing it all basically by myself. And I had to hire people occasionally to help with things that I needed to do that were things a single person couldn't do alone. And that and working full time made that somewhat stressful. So my last bullet here about having time to enjoy it is an important one, that I wanted to not just feel stressed about it all the time, but actually enjoy what I was doing. Next slide, please. So just a couple notes here on the stuff that I'm doing on my land now. The background map here is one that Sam actually made for me. Is part of my new lease agreement, but I've been trying to establish native plants as pollinator hedgerows, so woody bushes, as well as when I first came here, I established about maybe close to 800-foot row of black locust, and then a few other things mixed in, some white pine and oak and some other species, primarily because I wanted to get fast shade in the middle of the farm for livestock, because it's important to me that to always provide shade for my animals as they rotate through the system. But that's grown up nice and big now, so that was very successful. And then this spring, in fact, Sam helped me do this too. I hired Sam to help me plant trees. We planted 25 new trees in the southern part of my farm to develop what's called silvopasture, where essentially it'll be a grove of trees, but I'll still be able to graze my livestock in it because I planted things in rows, so I can fence the livestock out. Next slide, please. So this past winter, or a year ago, I would say, I decided that it was partly inspired by the drought that we had last year. I needed to destock because I basically didn't have enough grass to feed the animals last year because the drought was so bad. And I had to start feeding my hay that I had harvested in the middle of summer. And therefore, I ended up needing to sell a lot of my young stock as replacement animals to someone else who had more grass. So the whole operation needed to scale down because of the drought, and that I felt that was a good moment to sort of move to my next phase and end my sheep operation. So my goal was, I didn't want to give up altogether. So my goal was to find someone else to graze on my land. I've made a lot of progress on this land. Of the 90 acres, there's 60 of it that are grazable, and they're in, it's fabulous pasture now, and it wasn't this way when I came here. So I really didn't want to go backwards in terms of managing this farm as a grass-based livestock operation. So I wanted to find someone else to raise livestock here. And I also have some pretty serious mugwort and multiflora rose invasions on my land. So I knew that if I basically just stopped grazing, the whole thing would just turn into a big mugwort farm. So I didn't want that to happen. And I really wanted to continue with my plans for improving habitat. So next slide, please.
There we go.
So last, I don't remember exactly when it was. It might have been early summer a year ago. I listed my farm with the Columbia Land Conservancy Farmer Landowner Match Program, and didn't get any action for quite a while. I was starting to sort of give up. But then Sam mentioned that someone that lives very near to me was also looking for land for cattle. And it turned out that two guys who have a beef cow, 100% grass-fed beef operation, literally 2 minutes from me, were looking to expand onto more land because they don't have enough land to continue to grow their herd. So I entered into an agreement with them. It took us a while to develop the lease, but we spent the fall working on preparing the lease and then signed it in January. And at the same time, while all of that was happening, my neighbors right across the road from me, which is Hardy Roots Farm, they're 1,000 member vegetable CSA, once they heard that I was giving up my flock and I sell my product in their store, they felt really strongly that they wanted to continue to have sheep in the neighborhood. So they offered to start their own sheep operation, but basically have me help manage the new flock on my land. So all of this was happening at the same time that I was able to convince the cattle farmers that we could collaborate with some sheep farming, which is what I used to do. You know, when I had both sheep and cattle here myself, I would alternate. So we were rotating through the farm at about a 30-day lag. And it's having multi-species on the property is helpful for grass management and parasite control. And there's lots of good things about having both cattle and sheep on the same operation. So there was agreement, you know, it's written into the lease. I'm training the person that was just hired by Hardy Roots to manage the sheep. So I'm helping basically on a daily basis at present, but in time, you know, it won't be, I can go on vacation for the first time in 20 years and I'll be able to not be the person who's stressed out at night and I'm worrying about things. So it's kind of a perfect situation for me. Columbia Land Conservancy was super helpful in helping me figure out how to write the lease. And I did use one of these lease builder templates that's online that they helped me find to do that. And it's a little bit non-traditional because I have a lease signed with the cattle farmers and I'll have another lease signed with the sheep farmers. But each of those leases say you have to be able to be willing to collaborate with the other person that this farm is leased with. So it's not like the cows are leasing a certain set of fields and the sheep are leasing a different set of fields. They all have to be able to work together. So as Sam was mentioning, communication is going to be super important. We, you know, since the sheep have only been here for 3 weeks, we've only met as all of us together once so far, but we will begin having regular meetings with both the cattle guys and the sheep people and myself, just to make sure that, you know, we know where the cattle are going to move next. And we're not, you know, both thinking that we're going to graze the same field at the same time and that sort of thing. So at present, it seems like it feels like a really good situation. Sam, do you want to go to the next slide, please?
Sure.
So the caveat is that I will say, you know, this first summer with the cattle guys it's not been totally smooth sailing. And I think I will say they really know what they're doing. I've been managing grass-fed livestock for almost 20 years, so I know what I'm doing too. And I was really pleased that they, you know, they're very professional about it. They know what they're doing. They're not novices. They've been doing it for about 8 years. And I think that's a big plus and they definitely pay attention. During the summer, they were here 3 times a day. They'd stop in first thing in the morning at about 7 a.m. just to do a move. And then they'd always stop by in the middle of the day to make sure that, you know, nobody got out. And then they move again in the evening. So they're moving twice a day. So they're moving polywire around the farm all the time. But I will say that my management style is to do a lot of brush hogging, and it's been important for me to do that. I've learned over the years that I've been on this farm that we got to maintain the pressure to keep the mugwort from taking over. So this summer, as you might be able to see on this slide, the main area in the middle of the slide is a field that the cattle hadn't been on in maybe 2 months. And it was really just overwhelmed with mugwort and multiflora rose. And if it was me, I would have mowed that field straight after the cows came out, because there was a lot of mugwort and a lot of multiflora rose there when the cows ate the grass, but they didn't eat those invasives. So this summer that we had conflict about, the farm kind of looked pretty bad all year. The part in the sort of middle to the left there is a field that I convinced them to make hay on, because they just weren't moving their cattle fast enough. So it looks nice and clean, but only because we took a hay cutting on there. And you can see in the picture on the lower left, a different field that doesn't really have much mugwort in it, but it still looks pretty ratty. And I've convinced them now that the whole farm has to be brush hogged at least once a year, and some fields really need it twice a year to keep the invasives down. So this year has been a learning process, and I just want to emphasize to everyone that if you're a landowner looking to have people graze your farm and you really love the idea of having beautiful livestock out there, you need to both kind of know what to expect, but also educate yourself a little bit as to what the constraints are. Sam, if you want to go one more slide, I think it's the last one here.
Yep.
Yeah. So this picture in the background is my flock. That's actually just the females from my flock in 2017. And you can see how kind of clean it looks. And the farm definitely didn't look like that this year with the cows. And so my advice would be that, first of all, the landowners do need to understand that, if people are trying to make a living on this, they can't necessarily afford to be brush hogging all the time. It's expensive, it takes time, it's labor, it's tractor time. So there's certain things that are going to be hard for farmers that are literally working very hard and trying to make a living. But on the other hand, I think that it's important to understand where that compromise point is going to be for you, because you got to be able to live with it. And if you're feeling just angry that everything looks like hell all the time, then maybe this isn't the right situation. So compromising is important, and it may take time. I mean, I'm finding now that it's taking time for us to kind of work through what all those expectations are. And I do feel hopeful that next year, we're talking about it all the time. I'm trying to be very clear on what my expectations are now, and both of me and the renters are setting up an expectation for how we're going to do it next year. So we're trying to figure out who's going to pay for the brush hogging and things like that. So that's the end of what I had to say. So thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Jen, for sharing. And just looking at the time, in the interest of keeping this to 8 p.m., I'm just going to move quickly over to Sam Rose. Sam is the farmer at Sunrunner Farm, which is a small grains operation in Red Hook, New York. And he also, Sam, you tell me your title at the Four Corners Community Farm, but you are instrumental and essential in the operation of Sunrunner Community Farm, which is also sort of a side operation, nonprofit operation that's established community garden space and educational opportunities for people in Red Hook. So yeah, I'll take it away, Sam. Share.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm happy to be here with everybody. I thought I'd kind of go over the multi-year process. Sometimes I call it a journey, sometimes I call it a saga, but it got me here. I came to the region with my family to manage a small farm in Pine Plains. It belonged to somebody else and it's going great, but I think in the back of my head, I always had the fantasy of owning my own farm and running my own farming enterprise. And went through several or pursued several different avenues to do that for a while until I ended up on the lease that I'm on now. So I'll kind of explain that because I think it gives some perspective. The first piece of property I found was actually in Red Hook, relatively nearby. It was a great piece of land, prime soils. It had a conservation easement on it already. And I had multiple conversations with Art the Dutchess Land Conservancy, who put together that easement about that piece of land. One of the interesting things that I learned about that is that it really depends on where the money comes from to put together these easements. This one, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it was USDA money, which meant that it was pretty severely encumbered by what activities could take place. So it had to be, these are monies that are applied the same way in Nebraska as they are in the Mid-Hudson Valley. So pretty much just farming. If you can't really make an event space, you can't do other business activities, it has to be straight farming. So that was pretty limiting, which is fine. But I think that the price that the owner wanted was almost as if it weren't with those encumbrances, that almost as if it didn't have an easement. So it was something that wasn't feasible for me. So I moved on. Next came another piece of a nice piece of property, a working farm in Red Hook. The owners were ready to move on to the next phase of their lives. And that was a lot of legwork on my part, trying to almost convince the owners that if they were to enter an easement, bring the price down, it would they wanted to leave a legacy, a farming legacy, but just land prices as they are made that very difficult. So it seemed like perhaps getting this easement would make it more viable for a farmer, in my case, me, to purchase that land. And it turned out, after a lot of legwork, almost selling the idea to the farmers, but also selling the idea, in this case, it was a lot of work by Scenic Hudson and Columbia County Land Conservancy, selling the idea of both these parties. We got to the point where we got an assessment done. And based on that assessment, the price of the reimbursement from the easement was based on that assessment, but the actual assessment price didn't meet the owner's expectations. So that fell through as well. And then I came across and learned more about the online platform. In this case, it was American Farmland Trust, but I know that Columbia County is also, I'm not exactly sure what all the crossover is. There's a lot of layers there, but they're all on these websites. And I found a piece of property basically around the corner from where my family and myself live in Red Hook. It's a piece of the owners are people that I probably would have never have come into contact with were it not for this platform. So that was a real service. At that point, they had kind of advertised, I'd given up at this point on owning a piece of land. COVID had already hit. Land prices were through the roof. They were interested in leasing, but they were also interested in some kind of a farming activity that served the community. And prior to coming to Dutchess County, my family and we lived in Mexico, and we founded a nonprofit that was doing urban agriculture in the place we lived. And so I kind of proposed an idea loosely based on that experience on their farm, in addition to the farming enterprise that I wanted to establish. So the idea was, and is, I have my own farming enterprise, small grains like wheat and rye and those kind of things, also a bunch of hay on there. That's called Sunrunner Farm. And then in addition, we are co-founding, the owners of the land and myself, we are co-founding Four Corners Community Farm, which we call community-based at this point, but the idea is we're going to convert to a nonprofit 501c3. And that's about 5 acres of these prime soils that we have on this piece of property that we've opened to the community. We run organic gardening workshops. And kind of in response to the whole COVID situation, as a matter of fact, we're focusing not only on health and nutrition because we produce food that we donate to Red Hook Responds, but we also focus on social cohesion, community resilience, and environmental stewardship. So we have these community fields that we manage with the help of volunteers from the community. 100% of the vegetables produced there go to Red Hook Responds, which is a nonprofit that also sprung up during COVID. They take this, we would have never been able to do this by ourselves. We don't have cold storage, we don't have the distribution capacity. So we actually harvest it, and within hours it goes to the cold storage of Red Hook Responds, where they process it, either preparing meals, or they have an online platform themselves in which the food gets distributed to local pantries, food banks, etc. In addition to that, we have plots that community members can adopt, just like kind of a standard community garden model. And then we offer workshops and tools and other consulting to help folks who may have some inhibitions about gardening or don't know where to go or need some help, suggestions, etc., to make sure that they meet success. And it's been great. These two things kind of complement each other. And then most recently, with the owner's permission, I've been able to sublease to a second farmer who does pasture-based livestock. And this was something that's really got a lot of potential for us. In my original enterprise plan, I wanted to have that holy grail of livestock and crop production, keeping fertility on the farm, improving the land, etc. Also, it allows me to take some of the grain that I produce that might not be fit for human consumption. I can turn it into livestock feed, but it was a lot to manage. And so now I'm subleasing to this person who does livestock. It brings a little bit of income to me, but it also spreads out the workload and allows us to collaborate. We both have this similar vision. The owners share that vision. And that's just getting started, but we're pretty sure that it's going to have a lot of success. And of course, it also adds to the community garden, Four Corners Community Farm, because now we have livestock present. And though it's a business, we can still integrate that into some of our activities. The kids love it. Adults love it as well. And so this lease that I have is a multi-year lease. It's 8 years right now. We've both, myself and the owners, have voiced that we would love to somehow figure out a way to eventually have me purchase the property if that's a possibility. But we want to leave space for the business to develop, see where it goes, see if it's viable, and then we would start looking for ways in which to secure that tenure down the line. That's the basic gist of it.
Great. That's so helpful. And thanks again for sharing your perspective. Just seeing as that we're already at 7:45, I just want to open the floor up to any responses or questions that anyone in the audience has. Terrence, I don't think I saw any come through the chat yet, but people have specific questions for Sam or Jen or other Sam. Feel free to unmute yourself or turn your video on and ask away. Or if any of our other panelists have questions for each other, that'd be fine too. Here we go.
I could also share just a little bit of some of the challenges that, like Jen mentioned as well. I think that it's definitely something to keep in mind that you'll have to make compromises along the way, both as a farmer and a landowner. It's not just even the farm and the landowners. The landowners actually have a couple of apartments that they rent on the land. So we have to take into consideration those tenants as well and their situation. So it's almost a community on this piece of land at this point. It's not just a business anymore. Farming can be kind of messy, as Jennifer Fimble mentioned. And we all have to be mindful. And so that's been a challenge and an opportunity. It's a challenge because we just have to go that extra mile to make sure that we keep the space acceptable. But at the same time, some of these residents on the land who are just renting the apartments, they've actually contributed and participated in activities, especially in the community farm, the Four Corners part. So it's actually been a net positive in many ways.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think we had one question, someone in the chat.
He has a question for me.
Yeah, someone, Helene Marsh.
Yeah.
Helene, hi, Helene.
Hi. This is a question for Jennifer. Thank you very much for talking about your experiences. And the question that I have is you mentioned, your sort of priority areas, and one of them was improving wildlife habitat. And so I was just curious about the balance between the agricultural production and the wildlife habitat from the perspective of brush hogging. And do you feel that the brush hogging endeavors, which you would prefer to do, have a negative impact on wildlife habitat?
So are you thinking about like ground nesting birds or?
Well, yes, and also just insects and pollinators and, you know, other smaller creatures that might live in the pasture.
Mm-hmm. So there may be some impact, but I think that there's also some upside too. Mugwort makes pretty lousy habitat for a lot of things. And so the more I can manage it as a diverse pasture grasses, and I'm also often, historically anyway, I've included lots of flowering plants in my pasture, the clovers as well as birdsfoot trefoil and chicory and things like that, that are very much used by pollinators. And I think there is some impact, for example, on maybe spiders or something that would use the land more if I wasn't doing any brush hogging. But I think that there's kind of a balance there with just the composition, maintaining the composition as diverse habitat, diverse plants in the pasture that it would be solid mugwort if I wasn't managing it. And then the other thing is that I'm trying to increase more woody plants and do more, like all the big fields are getting separated up into either with hedgerows or rows of trees so that there's more brushy areas. And there were brush piles on the land when I came here because it had been in, many of my fields had been in orchard when I came, and a lot of those trees had died. So the previous owner had all of those trees removed and then piled up. So I've actually fenced out all those brush piles and they make fabulous like rabbit habitat. So I have lots, I'm trying to sort of increase the number of places where I have refuges like that and then utilize the pasture for rotational grazing.
Thank
So
you.
I think there's a little bit of compromise in there, but I'm trying to find that happy medium.
Okay, thanks.
Looks like we had another question from Tamara.
Yeah.
Oh, I see a hand. Yeah, go ahead.
So we have a old, beautiful dairy barn with a very leaky roof. And we only just moved in about a year ago and are trying to sort everything out. So haven't found anyone to use our land, but this is greatly informative. But we really feel that we need to replace that roof before anybody possibly comes onto our property. How do we, besides just finding roofers, which we do have located one, any other advice about how we move forward with the hopeful future for it to be returned to agricultural use?
Do you know how old the barn is?
Our inspector thought early 1900s. We know from other people in the area who grew up here, they were milking like in the 40s and 50s. Other than that, I don't know.
New York State has a historic barns preservation fund. I would look that up and see if you can't find and apply for some funding to help you do that.
Okay.
That's what they're doing on the farm that I'm at as well. And we use that barn for storage and other activities, and they're looking for funding through that program
Okay.
to repair.
Yeah, I was going to just say that I don't know if you necessarily need to like fix it first, because there's plenty of things, like I don't offer barn space to the people that are grazing here. My animals don't stay in a barn in the wintertime, and I am storing some hay there, but when I came here as a renter to this farm, the owner was in the process of renovating her barns, but she hadn't done the electric yet. And it was great for me because she said, where do you want outlets? How do you want this done? And so it was actually helpful to me that she waited to do the electric until I was here, because there were things that I needed that she never would have thought of.
Wow.
So you might, I mean, that's the kind of thing that ideally you could do kind of in group decision with somebody who's potentially gonna use it so that you can tailor it.
Great. No, thank you. That's all of this is great advice. Thank you so much.
That's the same case actually as where I'm at right now. They asked me where I needed electrical outlets, and we decided together. And in addition, I don't know if this is your situation, but they had a lot of tractors that came with the property that they inherited, and they're letting me use that as well, which is a huge help. We created a fund together. They got them in working order at the get-go, but now from now on, we have a maintenance fund that we both contribute to. And that's what we do, all the servicing with, et cetera, on a yearly basis. We get it back up to its original quantity, that fund, that account, and then we just draw it down through the year as needed.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
See a hand from the third Samuel.
Yeah, good. My question is, the activity that occurs via your rental posting and whatnot, who are the typical people that are offering leases? Who are the typical people that are taking those leases or taking them on? And what kind of farm operations are they typically?
Yeah, so I would say it's pretty broad. We have a lot of forms of agriculture in our area. So at least on our program and in the statewide program, you'll have folks who are just getting started, being farmers who are looking for small plots to do things like start a market garden or a small CSA, or do maybe some mushroom logs in the woods, or starting really small. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have even big players in the county, larger dairies who are looking for extra support land, whether it's hayland or just general cropland. So, they might be looking for large acreage to do row crops like corn or pasture to run animals on. So it's a wide range. And then in terms of farm properties, again, it's similar. People who have maybe one or two extra fields and aren't sure what to do with them, or are kind of wondering if a farmer can make good use of them. And then people who own 100, 200 acre pieces of property who don't have interest in operating themselves and really are looking for larger scale operations to come in and take over management there. So really the whole range is what my short answer would be.
And where do you see the most activity? Is it across the whole spectrum, or?
Pretty much. At least lately, with an influx of sort of newer landowners in our county, it tends to be a little bit of a smaller parcel, maybe mid-size, like 10 to 30 acres, people who have a couple of farm fields, who want to see something happen there, but don't really know where to start. And that can be a little bit challenging in terms of scale, but certainly has been sort of the trend over the last maybe 12 months or so. And then we also work a lot with people who are looking to purchase farms. So farmers who are looking for that sort of mid-sized farm, whether it's to establish like a diversified operation, which includes grazing and produce or something like that. So that's kind of the trends of the last year or so, at least from what I see. Anyone, parents or men, would you say anything different, or?
I might, well, first of all, quickly introduce myself. I work with Sam at CLC. I think that, and if you were to look at either our website or the statewide website, you'll see all of the profiles are open to be reviewed. I think what you'd find is a lot of the farmer profiles tend to focus on those smaller acreage or beginning operations. And many of those like the large scale dairy operations that are leasing a lot of land for hay and support land. They don't typically make postings like, land wanted ads. So in those situations, when landowners reach out to us and they have a field that is really prime for being hayed, we have kind of a bank of farmers who have been around for a long time, and we kind of look geographically who's close to them. And then similarly, we do have a lot more grain farmers like Sam on the call today, who have been looking at more kind of organic management and things that seem to be getting more interest from landowners. So in some way, we're seeing, I think, more interest in kind of more novel crops coming onto land, which is interesting, onto those larger acreage of land.
Okay, thank you.
Well, it is 7:59, so hold out for one more minute if anyone has any final thoughts they want to offer. But I just want to thank our speakers again, Jen Phillips, Sam Rose, and Jen Fimble for being on the call and offering their perspective. And of course, go ahead, Sam Rose. Looks like.
Oh, I just had one final thought. I would have been lost without the help of Sam and Terrence and Art, and then also Tim Bello from Farmland Trust. I mean, these navigators really helped walk both myself and the landowner through the process, made sure that everything was transparent. They helped with, even stuff like putting maps together so that it was all delineated in the lease. And then in addition to that, I guess they have an agreement with Pace University where there's a team of lawyers who do the pro bono work to just review everything at the end. So I'm really grateful. And I would say it's a long process, but it's doable, and there's a lot of help out there.
Yeah, I'll second that. It's super helpful, and also just making me feel more secure about the process so that I wasn't kind of worried that I was going to do something wrong and get myself into a situation that was not going to be good for me. So I think the advice and assistance with the lease was super, super useful. So thanks you guys for doing what you do.
Well, thank you. Thanks for making our job fun and letting us come hang out on your farm every once in a while. I think that's a great place to end it. So thanks
you very much
for attending. And there will be a recording of the webinar sent out to everyone who signed up to register, so you can review and go back, and we'll follow up with a couple of resources as well. So
Thanks for having me.
Great night.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.